Now, before we meet our next guest, the next 60 seconds may change your child's life. Watch this. I'm Josh Langley, and I inspire kids right around the world with my Being You Is Enough series of books, my school talks, and my online program, Inspiring Kids. Now, I want to inspire your kid to find their inner brave and their inner courage to accept themselves as they are and give them a set of tools and a set of skills to be their best selves. Because I know that when you reduce all the resistance, all that negative self-talk, all that hate, all that dislike about yourself because you feel different, when you suddenly are able to let go of that, that energy is then transformed into something magical and powerful. So let me inspire your child. Should we just get going? So, are you ready?
Yes.
Are you ready, Gary? Okay. Are you ready? Okay, you ready?
I thought it was on the phone, so Josh really kindly gave me some extra time to wash my hair.
Are you ready?
Yeah, ready as all everybody.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Let's do it.
I've just had an amazing chat with an author who's written 2 books that I needed when I was a kid. The first book is called You've Got This. Now, this helps people, students, adults who are making that transition into university or TAFE, into a higher education, but they think they can't do it. It's not for them. This is the book that they need to read. It's what I needed to read when I was a kid. Also, the second book is called When You Left. Now, this is a picture book, kids' picture book, to help young kids navigate when their parents divorce or separation. That's a book that I needed to read when I was a kid as well. And the author is Lorraine Horsley. Now, Lorraine has a Bachelor of Arts in English, an Associate Degree in Training and Development, a Masters of Arts in Professional Writing and Literature, and has just commenced a Creative Writing Higher Degree by Research. For many years, she was a presenter and producer with the ABC Radio. She also spent the last couple of decades teaching and tutoring students at the start of their higher education journeys, hence before. She's also a Cultural Programs Officer with the City of Melbourne, working on library events. So, let's get to know the amazing, the incredible, the uber talented Lorraine Horsley. Lorraine Horsley, thank you so much for coming on my show. How are you going?
I'm going really well, Josh, and thanks so much for the opportunity. I've been really looking forward to chatting to you.
Well, you have got 2 amazing books out at the moment that resonate so deeply with me. You've got a picture book out that came out in July. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But firstly, I want to talk about this amazing book that came out late last year. Now, this is called, if I remember rightly, so You've Got This, Tips for an Uncertain Student. Now, where was this book when I was leaving high school and floundering and just, I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about You've Got This?
I can, and it's actually the book I wish I had when I started university as well.
Isn't it strange? We always write the books we really needed to read, don't we?
I think so. It was funny. I had the idea for the book. I was driving along thinking I might have a go at writing nonfiction. I thought, what would I write? And I thought I'd write something for my students because I teach Uni Ready at Curtin. And I have a lot of broken students. They get to me at 17 and think they're incapable of learning, which I think is really heartbreaking. Driving along, and by the time I got home 20 minutes later in my driveway, I had all the chapter headings in my head of what I think everyone needs to know when they start university. So it's not really a book about how to study. It's about how to be brave enough to study in the first place. So I thought this is the book that my students need. And I'm really proud to say that my unit coordinator, who's my boss, came along to the book launch. And now the book is actually on the reading list for my students. So fingers crossed they're actually reading it.
I was actually going to ask that because I was looking through the chapter headings, which I'm going to read a couple out in a minute, but how important that would be for these kids who are doing that. What did you call it? Uni Ready.
Yeah, Uni Ready. So that's the name of the bridging course at Curtin University that I teach in. I teach communications through Uni Ready. And often we get students that are just coming through a non-traditional pathway. So they've just applied directly to Uni Ready. We get mature age students. We get students that might have attempted ATAR, but maybe didn't do as well as they'd hoped. We used to do like a little getting to know you exercise. And I was heartbroken at least a third, if not half of the students, it was a writing exercise, and we'd ask them what their barriers to learning were. And most of them said, I suffer from anxiety. I don't believe I'm smart enough. I don't think I'm going to make it through this. That fear of failure was just massive. And I just wanted to take them all and go, you're going to be okay. You can do this. So this little cheery yellow book is my little cheerleader, which I hope that, you know, somebody will pick it up at the right point, and it will just keep them going and give them a little bit of encouragement.
I think it's such an important book because that transition, especially because going to university now, it is still like it's a big thing for a lot of people to do, especially for a mature age student, or for someone, as you said, didn't do too well in ATAR like myself. But it is that provides that opportunity, because it's like people think, you know, if you don't do well at ATAR, that's it, you're stuffed.
Yeah.
But really, there are so many different pathways to go to university now. And I think by having this book to give these kids that confidence, or kids and adults in that confidence. But I want to know, why do you think there is such this lack of self-confidence? What do you think is the cause of that?
That's a really hard question to answer. I think comparison-itis is a big thing. So we look at the person next to us that's doing incredibly well and think, well, why is that not me? And I guess when we live a lot of our lives online, we often see all the positive side of things. We don't see the struggles that people go through. So I often say to my students, look, you know, most of them suffer from imposter syndrome. And I didn't know.
You've got a big chapter in there about that too.
Yeah, I didn't know what imposter syndrome was myself till a few years ago. And when I talk to my students about it, often they sit up and go, oh, hang on, that's me. So it's like the person sitting next to you might be brilliant and talented, and you see all of that on the outside, but you don't see how they're actually feeling. And the chances are they probably feel the same way as you do. They're just not telling you about it. So overcoming that imposter syndrome, I think, is a really big thing. And also getting the message across that the people that succeed. I met a student last year who was one of my first students that I taught in Uni Ready, and she's just completed her PhD. So it's all a matter of putting one foot in front of the other until you get there. And I think they often come in thinking, I'm not smart enough. But what does that actually mean? And realistically, it's a matter of just putting in the work. You fail, and sometimes the people that fail do better because they learn more, because they go back and work out why they failed. So even failure isn't failure. It's giving up is failure.
That's really interesting, because it's the failure. There's so many opportunities and learning opportunities when you fail and stuff like that. And it can be such a lonely experience. Well, you can be perceived to be lonely experience going to university because it's just you, but it's not. You've got your lecturers, you've got your fellow students, and you're actually supported all the way through. And that's what I found, because my husband went to university at the ripe old age of 57, and now he's doing an honours degree, and it just shows that there are no barriers to going to uni. And I for me, even though if someone said, Josh, would you go to uni? I'll go, nah. I would still mostly think it's actually too hard. But that's why I think your book is great, because I think the first chapter you've got is called Facing the Past and Forgetting It. Now, I love that. It's like because you carry all your baggage with you. I'm not good enough. I'm useless. I failed high school. You know, who's going to let me out? And you just go, nah, in the past, let's start afresh. And I think that's a brilliant idea. I love that approach.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's when I teach face-to-face. I teach a lot online now, but when I used to teach face-to-face, I used to close the door and say to them, this is your new academic career. Everything that's happened outside of that door up until this point no longer matters. What happens now is entirely up to you. And again, they often sit up and go, oh, this is interesting. I think because you do carry your past around in like a big, heavy hold and it dogs you at every step if you have failed at something. So one of the things I failed was maths. I hated maths with a passion. And it wasn't until I was writing the book that I realized why. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I had a really cool teacher. And there was a boy who sit next to me, and it was always he'd get a clip in the ear, he got an answer wrong, really vindictive. So as soon as I started to struggle with maths, the last thing I was going to do was put my hand up and ask a question, because I didn't want to end up in that situation.
Yeah.
And then I ended up teaching maths in a bizarre twist of fate. When I first started teaching, I said, I'll teach anything but maths. And of course, that's what happened to me. And I was one step ahead of the students. And I was able to show the students a different way to approach maths. At one point, one of them said to me, "Oh, this is easy for you. You're the maths teacher." And I nearly choked on my coffee. So I was like, "Do I tell you the truth?" And I did. And I said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you the truth."
That shows vulnerability from your behalf.
Yeah, I was terrified. I thought they were going to walk out. I said, "I've got a degree in English. I'm one lesson ahead of you." And they were like, "What, really?" And I went, "Yeah, so if I can learn algebra, you can learn algebra, and you ain't leaving today until you can do it." And they graduated, they got through their course. And
wow.
I learned also an important lesson that being an expert in a subject doesn't necessarily make you a good teacher.
Oh, yes,
so,
definitely.
Yeah,
yes. Yep.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about putting the book together, a lot about learning and about overcoming that fear of the past, because the past does belong in the past. And if you approach something in a new way, the chances are you can work it out.
Yeah, and I like that, especially about the maths bit, because I keep telling everyone I'm really bad at maths, but it's mostly it was the way I was taught it in school, thousands of years ago, and that put the barrier up, But now if I'd actually learnt maths the way I would actually learn it, which is slowly, gently, had a good teacher who would actually guide you through the process, and you did it over and over again, I would actually end up being quite good at it, but I've got this mental thing about I'm just bad at maths, and but what you're saying is actually it's just the way you teach it and the way you learn it, and that can be adaptable.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a good teacher just makes such a big difference. So yeah, it is interesting working through with some of these students, like some of the things they really struggle with, and then all of a sudden they get it, and you get that light bulb moment, and it's just fantastic.
So is the book available? Is it also for people who are going off to TAFE, or is it more for for university?
It's funny because obviously I had university and students in mind when I wrote it, but it's also for TAFE students. I've got quotes in there from students, and one of them was like a carpenter. He just finished his carpentry course. And when I've launched the book and I've done a couple of presentations, a few people have come up to me and said, "It's not just about study." Well, what? And they said, "Well, everything you've said in the book applies to anything you want to achieve in life, because it's like overcoming imposter syndrome and time management, receiving feedback." So they said you could just give it to anybody and it gives you some pretty good life tips. So I'm like, sure, it's for everybody.
Well, there's even a bit in there about, I think, about creating the space for the actual study and finding an area in your house or whatever to make it that zone, because you're taking it seriously. And I think that's one of the things that what you said earlier is that once you move into this and you make that commitment, I'm going to become, this is my academic career or this is my higher education career, but take it seriously, own that. And I think that gives people that certain level of confidence that sort of may be a counterpoint to the imposter syndrome. And I like that idea.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I talk a little bit about time management too, because often when we're afraid of failing, we find excuses for things. Like, I don't have the time. Uncle Joe didn't have a degree. I don't need a degree. Why am I doing this? And often that is fear disguised as something else. So I talk a bit about time management in that find your space. You only need 15 minutes. Like, so say, for example, you've got a big assessment due, and if you're anything like me, it'll be like, oh, I can start that on Friday. I've got a whole day on Friday. And then, of course, Friday disappears because you've got to take the dog to the vet or whatever. And then you don't start, and then the procrastination builds and so on and so on. And that gets really, everything gets put on the back burner. The problem with that is, of course, nothing ever gets cooked on the big burner. So just having that 15 minutes, as I said, just 15 minutes is enough to start. And once you start, you've broken down a lot of those barriers of fear of starting, and you kill that procrastination cycle. So yeah, having space and just a little bit of time is all you need to get started, and you just continue.
Yeah, and that gives you that sort of that belief. This is it. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. I love that. What a great book, and what a great idea. And I love the way it's so simply laid out as well. It's little bite-sized bits, and it's not some great tome of a thing. And you, as you said earlier, you've actually got little quotes from previous students at the end of each chapter.
Yeah.
Go, if they can do it, maybe I can. So look, you've got this. Tips for uncertain students. I think I love that. That's a great idea. Now, where can people get that from?
The best book depository is probably the cheapest option because worldwide free postage. And I've got my website as well, lorrainehorsley.com, but I only ship to Australia.
Beautiful. Okay, I'll put that down at the bottom. Now let's move on to your first children's picture book. Now I'm going to tell you a little story. All right. My parents divorced when I was about 12, and it was like yay, I'm so glad they divorced because they just kept arguing all the time. So, and then the new partner on my dad's side came in after a year or so, and there was just no way for a child to navigate what was going on, what was happening in that situation, and you just had to make it up and survive as you went. There was no, both parents didn't go, oh, this is what's happening. How do you feel about that? There was none of that. It was just like, this is what's happening. Deal with it. Now, you have written a book, okay, called When You Left. Now, this is a book to help kids navigate divorce, separation, and also when a new partner comes in to the frame. What was the inspiration for this book?
Well, I'm a stepmom and a mum. Like we've got, I've got 2 wonderful stepchildren who are now in their 30s and 3 other children. So we've got 5 kids altogether, and I always think we're really blessed. We all get on really well. I get on really well with my husband's ex-partner and her new partner. But initially, when I became a stepmom, nobody really knew their roles. You know, it was a confusing time for everybody, and I'd imagine obviously it was a very confusing time for my stepchildren. And they call me the wicked stepmom. So I'm not wicked, I'm wicked. Which I really like.
As in the good, the wicked. Yeah,
wicked, okay, yeah. So that was really important to me to have a book where I guess it acknowledges that tangle of conflicting emotions. And when your parents split up, I'm sure initially my stepkids would have wanted their mum and dad to get back together. But as the years went by, I can remember my stepdaughter coming to me one day and saying, you know, people still say to me, do you wish your mum and dad would get back together? But she said, but then I wouldn't have Raina and me in my life, and I wouldn't have my stepdad, and life would be really different. So I thought it's really important that when you're living that pain and that difficult period, to know that will get better. It will change. It's only temporary. So I wanted a book that kids could pick up, could navigate those emotions with their parents. I think looking at a book is a little bit objective. So you can explore the emotions in the story, and then you can sort of cotton onto the emotions of the child sitting next to you and how they respond to the pages. So I wanted a book that it deals with all that emotion and that pain and that confusion. And there's a new parent coming in and there's more confusion. But at the end, it's ultimately a big hope, because it's, you know, things are different, not better, not worse, just different. And I think I'm going to be okay with that. And I think that's a really important message to get across. And it's okay to like your step parents. You know, initially, I think you'd be like, I can't like you. You've come in and destroyed my parents' life or whatever. And I think it's just a journey that a lot of kids go through. And I'm the same, probably close to the same age as you. And when I was in school, we had one child that I knew of lived with a sole parent, and that was her father, which was incredibly unheard of.
Yeah.
And I think that it's always good to have some extra tools out there to help navigate some of these emotions and difficult things that kids go through. And I really hope that When You Left will help do that and gives a focus point, I suppose. And I really love. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it is so good to have tools like that and books that you can read with the child to help facilitate those sometimes awkward conversations, you know, and get the idea of how the child's feeling, you know, and then the parent can then model behavior and model emotions, go, well, I feel strange about it too. So therefore, then the child feels okay about feeling strange about it, or feeling that it's going to be okay, you know, that sort of thing. I think the more tools that parents have to facilitate conversations, the better.
Yeah, and I think my illustrator, Mega Vishwanath, has done just a beautiful job of getting that emotion across. There's one of my favorite pages in there. I use the ocean as a bit of a metaphor for the depth of the sadness. And there's one in there where the little boy said, my insides are tangled like seaweed, you know, and there's this beautiful seaweed picture, and it just really captures that confusion, that muddled sense in your head of, I want to be happy, dad's happy, but mum's sad, and I feel like I'm betraying mum. And so all of that sort of, she's just done a beautiful job of encapsulating that in images, I think. And yeah, I think a picture book is a really good way to like I said, give that little bit of objectivity, but you can still tap into the emotion.
Yeah, I love that. Thinking about all that sort of stuff, Lorraine, I ask this question of everyone. Okay, are you ready?
Oh, I don't know.
What lights you up?
What lights me up? Gosh, I'm going to say it's kids. I went and did a school presentation. It's kids engaging with a story and seeing their faces light up when they get to have input into what they've heard and what they've read. So we went through this particular story, When You Left, and they wanted to talk about the emotion and they wanted to talk about the images. And it lights me up to see kids so engaged with the text and wanting to put their own spin on it. And I think that's an incredible gift to give a child, is the ability to read and the ability to express themselves through story.
I couldn't have said it better. Thank you. Thank you, Lorraine. Now, so When You Left and You Got This, both available from your website and also through Book Depository. I'll put your website down here. And you do delivery, postage, signed copies anywhere in Australia?
Yep, signed copies anywhere in Australia. Overseas, sorry.
Yeah,
postage
I get that.
is just too expensive.
It is way expensive, isn't it? Absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Look, Lorraine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the chat.